Hey everyone, and welcome to video 4.2.4 for the Legal Studies guy. Joined here by the delightful Rumi, who probably has no thoughts on the VLRC. But first of all, as always, a quick quote. Knowledge is being aware of what you can do. Wisdom is knowing when not to do it. And I think when we apply that to our Year 12 year, I reckon there's a lot of things we know that we could do, but it's best if we don't do it. This is the time now with a few months to go to really try and make some good choices and show some wisdom in order to maximise your results. So today, as I said, we're talking about the Victorian Law Reform Commission. The VLRC, as it is more commonly called. We're going to talk about just what it is, how it influences law reform. The key skill here is an evaluation, like strengths and weaknesses. Is it good or not? Like, how much value does it have? Value being in the word, at influencing law reform. But the next knowledge dot point is to look at a recent example of the VLRC, so a recent inquiry they've done, and it will much better help us illustrate that evaluation side of things. So we'll only briefly touch on that today. Ultimately, we are looking at what role does the VLRC play in law reform. So what is the Victorian Law Reform Commission, the VLRC? Really important word here is independent. So the VLRC, so make sure you highlight that one. The VLRC is an independent body. So it was established by an Act of Parliament, the Victorian Law Reform Commission Act 2000, which set it up as a body, but it then operates as an independent body. So there are no members of Parliament, no members of government who sit on the VLRC. So no one who actually makes laws is then part of the VLRC and trying to influence law reform through it. It is independent, and they will do research into existing legislation, existing laws, assess whether it's effective or not, and then recommend changes. So this is the law reform side of things. So recommend reforms to the Victorian Parliament. They'll also look at proposed laws, so not just existing legislation that maybe isn't working as well as it could. They'll also look at proposed laws in new areas. So, for example, they did when Victoria introduced medicinal cannabis quite a few years ago now. That was, I guess, a proposed set of laws that the VLRC did an investigation into and gave recommendations on how that system would work. But as part of that, they also looked at existing legislation around, the Controlled Substances Act, etc., which banned marijuana, made it a controlled substance. So that in that case, they were looking at both proposed or existing legislation and proposed laws. What they're aiming to do, the VLRC, is ensure that the legal system meets the needs of the Victorian community. So they're going to look at it through the lens of what is best for the community. There are 5 functions of the VLRC as set out by that act that I spoke about. So really what their role is as opposed to what they are. So really important language there. What is the VLRC and then what is their role? And if we kick back really quickly to that first slide, we'll see, well, what do we need to know about the VLRC? What knowledge? Specifically, we are looking at their role. So this role part, what they do is really, really important. Their role is that they will make law reform recommendations. So keyword here again, recommendations. Law reform recommendations on matters referred to them by the Attorney General, or recommendations on minor legal issues of general community concern. So these are really the 2 main roles, and centrally what we're saying here, not recommended, I should be saying recommending. Essentially, its main role is recommending law reform, and that can happen in 2 ways. That can be a referral from the Attorney General, and the Attorney General is like the Minister for Laws. So they're a member of Parliament and a member of government who holds a senior portfolio. And they're the ones who are like, hey, we're not sure this is working the way it's meant to be, or we're looking at maybe changing this or introducing this, and we're going to ask the VLRC to look at it first. Or if it is a minor matter of general community concern, the VLRC can start an investigation by themselves. So they're the two ways that they recommend law reforms. An example is they did a minor. They looked at the minor legal issue of general community concern of neighbourhood tree disputes a few years ago, and investigated that, and then made recommendations around how the laws could better deal with tree disputes between neighbours. They can ask the Attorney General to refer a matter to them, which is pretty rare, but they could. They also have this broad role of monitoring and coordinating law reform in Victoria, and also undertaking educational programs, and there's some great resources on their website for that. But we are going to really live in this top category here of they'll make recommendations on law reform on matters referred to them by the Attorney General, or minor legal issues of general community concern. There are two really big things we want to be across. You want to get in? So, how do they do this? Well, let's consider, generally speaking, and the VLRC investigation that we'll look at in the next set of slides will focus on a matter referred to them by the Attorney General. So we'll focus on the process for referral matters, but it is kind of the same for both. So they'll get the referral from the Attorney General. The referral will come with a terms of reference. This is a really, really important point because the terms of reference from the Attorney General sets the boundaries for the investigation, so sets the scope of the investigation and includes when the VLRC need to report back. So the terms of reference is really, really important because that's what sets up the entire process. And says this is what you are looking at specifically. This is what we want you to make recommendations on. Obviously, it doesn't tell the VLRC what the recommendation should be because the VLRC is independent, but it very much sets out the boundaries for the VLRC. And certainly can set, hey, you're not looking at this. You're looking specifically at this piece of legislation, and we're looking at a system to do this, perhaps. So terms of reference from the AG, really, really important. Once the VLRC gets the terms of reference, they're immediately going to start doing research. So they'll do this initial research and try and identify the most important issues. Generally, they'll publish a list of questions that they consider, the questions that they're looking to answer as part of their inquiry. And they'll publish this in what's called a consultation paper or an issues paper. The name of this tends to change from project to project, but they're effectively the same thing. And they'll put that out to the public. So they'll go, hey, this is how the current system's working. This is all the research we've done into it. These are the things that we've discovered through checking other jurisdictions, looking at how it currently works, looking at what maybe the issues are. These are the key issues or the key questions that we're considering, and we would love now to consult with the public and the community on those. So they want to hear from community members and they want to hear from the public, which is really important with law reform, as we know, because Parliament is representative. Then they're going to go and do that. They're going to do this public participation. Now, if you check the VLRC's website for their process, it has about 10 steps and they've got a poster and stuff for it. And I've really just distilled this down into 5 to make it a bit simpler. So public participation is then going to occur. They're going to consult with affected parties and interested members of the community. I want you to note that participation in this consultation is voluntary. The VLRC can't force people to comply. So you have to have people that are interested, and that can be more than just individuals. There'll be submissions from organisations, government bodies, government departments, etc., who all want to have a say on what they think should happen with the law. We're going to look at the VLRC inquiry into stalking laws, for example, and a lot of the submissions they received were from people who'd been impacted by stalking, who were really putting forward, hey, this is what we think should change, as well as groups like, Victims of Crime Commissioner, victims assistance organisations, community legal centres, etc., who have real life experience in the area that the VLRC is looking at. So really, really important, this public participation part, both from the expertise that they get from these organisations and individuals, but also in terms of the representative nature of Parliament and making sure recommendations meet the needs of the people. Once they've done this, They've done all their research. They've spoken to individuals and organisations. They've figured out what the main issues are, etc. They're then going to write a report, and these reports are very extensive. Hundreds of pages long. And in this report, they will include really clearly recommendations for reform. So we recommend this. The VLRC recommends this. Does that actually lead to a law change, though? Well, no. That report will then be tabled in Parliament, and it is up to Parliament to decide whether they implement the recommendations. So it will have to be passed through like a law is normally passed through Parliament. And obviously, we know central to that is whether the government decides that they actually want to make the changes. Now, generally speaking, the VLRC is quite successful. The government has asked for the review and the inquiry, and therefore they are more likely to implement the recommendations. But sometimes it just doesn't happen. Sometimes the government has other priorities. Sometimes they want to focus on different things, and as a result, there's certainly no certainty, no expectation, no clear obligation for Parliament to implement the recommendations that the VLRC gives them, and there's certainly no timeline for that either. This is, as I said, the VLRC's version of their steps. They'll give you 10 steps through their process. As I said, I've just distilled that down into 5 to just make it a little bit simpler. Referral, issues paper, participation, recommendations, response. Our key skill here, as I said, is giving a value judgment. So we are evaluating how good the VLRC is at influencing law change, but we need to use recent examples for this, and that's where we're going to focus on this a little bit more in the next video and the next set of slides, because this is a great question from the 2018 sample exam that we might be looking at. There are bodies that are more effective than the VLRC in influencing law reform, with reference to either parliamentary committees or royal commissions. Discuss the extent to which you agree with this statement. So, do you agree that other bodies are more effective than the VLRC? And to consider that, you need to be able to, definitely put in an answer the positives and the negatives of the VLRC. So, we'll look at that in that next video. You must go to the VLRC website for a look. It is a fantastic resource. It has great detail on all the projects they've done. It's a really well set up site. So I would thoroughly recommend you have a look at that. Hopefully, if someone asked you right now, maybe they saw it in the news and they said, hey, this VLRC, what role does that play? You could really clearly outline that, hey, they play a role in recommending law reform, and they can do this in 2 ways: from a referral or on a minor matter, minor legal issue of general community concern. Happy studying.